Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Decisions Lunch and Learn. I'm going to be your host, Gregory Goldston, on this February 19th. Few things I want to point out, as always, is Submersed. We've got Submersed coming up, and it'll be starting next week on Monday through Thursday. So please feel free to sign up if you'd like to see a demonstration of the Decisions platform. Doing this will also count for product training. So that's a nice bonus. DocBot AI is now available in your own home decisions environment. If you try to chat with a support member by clicking on the little chat button, usually on the bottom left side of your decisions portal, you will now have access to DocBot, or Dart as you will see it called. This will be able to answer various questions that you might have, such as documentation questions, questions about how to build out certain flows, questions about what certain flow steps do, how to configure reports, put reports on pages, so on and so forth. It can help you build out basic projects, as well as tell you about how the steps work. So that is everything that I would like to go over right now. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to switch over to my decisions environment and feel free for y'all to start putting in questions. Apologies, this is taking just a moment. Okay, and then can I make this bigger for you guys? Yes, I can. Fantastic. All right, so we're just going to be using yesterday's project. Why not just treat this as Wednesday? All right, and I think we already have a question. So let me get my list of participants. Let me get my list of questions here. All right. So the first question is from Vitali and is asking, on some steps, you can run the formula for an input, for example, add day step. How do you map the variables that are used in the formula? Here, I'm going to unmute you so that I can understand exactly what context you're asking this in. You should be able to talk now.
Hey, yeah, so on some steps, just like a converter flow, you can
Hmm.
run formula and, for example, add days for days to add. And inside of the formula, you can use variables. The question is, I didn't see a way to map some data to those variables.
So you're talking about that you run like a subflow that you're treating as a converter type flow where you put in the input, but you don't see a way to map the data into those
Uh,
particular, or is it the formula step specifically?
no, can you use add days?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So the add day step. Yep.
Yeah, for days, can you create formula?
Hmm. Create one or pick a
Uh,
normal converter.
Create formula.
Okay. All right.
And
And then we'll have a formula here that has a function that runs, right? Something that will,
for the input, can you create something like number or whatever?
yeah, absolutely.
And now use that number in your formula. It doesn't have to do much, so just use that number. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We select that here.
Okay, so save it.
You got it. Oh, I see. So you'll save this, and it's going to ask for that number input. But now, as soon as you use the formula, you don't have an option to input that particular. How do we make this work? Let
Could you
me think
make
about
could you just
this.
make the input data type the same? Because your input data type is double and it's expecting an N32
Sure, absolutely.
and see if that changes it. And it looks like I'm already seeing it now. No, that's not there. That's just source state. That could be just a
Yeah,
DT that we got to submit over formulas.
it might be.
I would
Yeah,
just take it offline and we'll test some further and we'll follow up with it.
sounds good. All right. Yeah, we'll take a look into this and see if this is expected behavior, if there's another way to do this. Alrighty. But yeah, I'm hoping that answers your question here. Clicking on and off of it provides the number option, but then it doesn't let you select the number from there. So, alrighty. Yeah. Vitali, we will take a look into that and see if that is a bug or not.
Okay, thanks.
Cool beans. All right, and we have got quite a variety more questions. We got a few from Alexander, so I'm going to read those off now. And the first one asks, what do the options when a conflict arise means when pulling down from repo mean? Why does decisions show the change data on steps if it hasn't occurred yet? Oh, these are separate questions. Okay. Let me we'll address each one at a time then. So you should be able to talk. So what do the options when a conflict arise means when pulling down from the repo? So you're trying to check out a project into your environment from the repository and you're getting some sort of conflict.
Right. But I was just curious about what they have an ignore option and they also have a use local, which wouldn't that be the same thing? And so that just kind of confused me.
Use local or ignore interruption. So
They also have the option to use what's in the repository as well. Which is override, I believe is what it's called.
That's the
yeah,
import
that-
resolutions. Can you find that?
import resolutions. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
that's the same thing. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, typically, I can explain these here because I am probably connected to a repository, but not for this project. So
I think there's a document that talks about it too, if we can find that.
I might be able to. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's take a look here. All right, let's take a look here. Using a repository. Not deploy. I'm gonna take a look here and see if this is.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yes,
Mhm.
I can
Yep.
still hear you. Yep.
Okay,
We
cool.
are,
Just checking.
Yeah, here we go. Checkout right here. You select it. And then you have that's your normal checkout window, import resolution screen. Yep, here we go. This is what we're looking for. So these are some of the ones that you have right here, right? You're
Mhm.
talking about these options. So
Yes.
the ignore import issue and import is basically saying, hey, we found this potential issue. If you decide to import this, the default action is to just import it anyway. So this is just telling you, hey, that's fine. Just like import it. Don't do anything else. Keep local version will mean that if something from that repository project already exists in the
Mhm.
environment you're checking it into, an earlier version of that project, and you have the option to select keep local version, it will not check out those particular parts of the project that have been updated that have this validation.
Gotcha. Versus exclude from import.
Exclude from import means it literally just won't import that part of the project whatsoever. Like it's regardless of whatever causes it, if it's overriding it, if it's creating a new one, if it's deleting an action, exclude from import just ignores any part of that element in the project as part of the checkout. It's in the repo, but it's not in the new environment. The difference between keep local version and exclude from import is keep local version means that there exists some sort of element that's already in that upper environment. Exclude from import, it could be a checkout that is deleting an element you previously had in that upper environment. Exclude from import is a more umbrella term than keep local version, if that makes sense. And then override is resolution will override corresponding element already present in local. So this is just kind of Yeah, just force it in anyway. Like whatever the element was that we're running into this issue, which is override. Now, you may not have all of these actions for each repository check-in. That's another reason that we have four of these because not all four are present for every element. It depends on what's being done with the element, what exists already, where the element is new, updating, is deleting a previous element. That all affects what options you get here when you're resolving them. Is that making some sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So sorry. I was using the wrong mic piece as well. I was
Oh,
connected
no
from my
worries,
laptop.
no worries. It's
So you
all
probably
good.
heard my whole background.
A little bit. It's not too bad though. Here, I will throw this right into the chat for you so that everyone can see that documentation and you have access to it as well. All right, let's get
Thank
to your
you.
next question that you had because I think you're still the only one with any questions right now. So the next one is, why does decisions show the change data on steps it hasn't occurred yet instead of data at time of running? I am not sure I understand this ask. Could you give a little more clarity?
Sure. It's just a general question. So whenever I do a mapping step and I like let's say overwrite a field or write something new to the field, if I look on the debugging screen and I go to like let's say the first node where it hasn't occurred yet, it'll show what has happened later on that data instead of what was there at the runtime.
So you got
Which
a mapping step or a list
yes,
mapping step. One of these two.
yes.
All
You
right.
got both, and I mean it'll just and only map on the second step or something like that. And then on the first step, it'll show what is happening on the second step, even though it didn't occur here.
Interesting.
And so that makes debugging a little hard. So I feel like I'm doing something wrong or I'm misunderstanding something.
What version are you running?
I believe that's version. Yeah, this is in version 9 because I'm doing all this work in dev.
Okay.
But was this a
And
problem in version 8
a
before?
specific? No, I just wanted to make sure that we were doing a test that's more relevant to your situation. All right. Now,
Okay.
when you talk about input mapping, you're talking about like, is there a certain input mapping type you're selecting to causes, or
Mm,
it's any of them?
I think it's any of them, as far as I can tell, where I just overwrite it at some point and then the node before will say, hey, you know, this is what it is. And I'm like, that hasn't happened yet. So why are you telling me this?
Interesting. So you're mapping this to another data type that's coming in. I'll just make an input for this real quick.
Yep.
And I'll make this a string just because it can take in most of the other types anyway. So output is just going to be a string. Input.
To make it easier, you could just do an add step, Gregory, because you don't have to do all the different mapping of the list mapping step. I think the germane problem is it's caused by just a mapping in general to another step, not
Okay.
tied to the list mapping step.
It's not this one in particular, you think? You think
Yeah,
it's just
no.
mapping. Okay.
Right, that's what we're talking about, Alexander. You're saying it's like if it passes to one step to another step, in the
Yes.
first step, it's going to show the yeah. It's not a list mapping issue.
Okay.
So I would remove the list mapping step and just add it like a mathematical add step. Yeah, there we go.
It could possibly be a mapping issue. I'm not sure because it does happen usually when I'm using the mapping step, you know,
Okay, so
but
you're
I'm not
mapping it
100%.
here, and then
So
this is
you are-
just overriding the previous mapping?
So when I do the debug and I look at, let's say you had a step here, like create data, and we had some data in there, and we can see the data that's passing through. When I do the add step, when I do the debug, it'll show what has happened in the add step. When I look at I'm sorry, the output of the create data step, which it shouldn't, right? Like,
So basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexander. Gregor, what he's talking about is, let's say you pass 45 plus 5. When you change the data in the debugger, when you look at age from a create data standpoint in the debugger input outputs, it's going to show 50 before it's even hit the add step. No, just leave it all default.
Okay.
And so
Debug this.
do you have it added to 5? I think you can remove that input. We don't need that. Just
I thought
remove
I
the
had
input
it to
there.
5, yeah.
Yeah, remove the inputs because we don't need that. We're not using that property.
Okay.
Close and save. Yeah. And so then go to create data. What's in create data? So if I'm correct, Alexander, you're saying that when we debug this, we're going to see the age as 50, even though it should be 45 at this standpoint, correct? Am I still audible or did I?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, gotcha.
No, that is correct. And I said,
Okay, cool.
if that's not the issue, then maybe it's possibly is the mapping step where I do the mapping and then it changes it everywhere.
So age 45 and then inputs there.
Yeah, that's looking fine to me.
Maybe it's a mapping thing. Maybe it's specifically when I do a mapping over.
Yes,
but
Alexander, I guess you have mentioned that on the add output, instead of rename, you use change value and you change value of that variable. And
yes,
in the debugger, you see in that first step as 50.
I do use change value.
You
Mhm.
use your guy. Okay. Let's see here.
That should show.
So we got 45, 45 here. What about the input?
I think there was an error that happened. Can you go back into it?
Where?
Close the debugger. I think there was an error somewhere.
Okay, let's
What
see
is
what
it?
it is. I'm
Yeah.
checking.
Oh, it's a different type. Change it to a decimal.
Oh. There we go.
And then did you set it up with a number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet.
This one's
This is-
0. And then the other one will be 0 plus 5.
Okay. And then go back. So create data, that one doesn't. So, and you said you're specifically utilizing the mapping step now, Alexander. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. What's the reason why you're using the mapping step?
I believe. I mean, I think in the scenario that I was doing before, it was that I need to overwrite a field, and set it equal to another one.
Oh, interesting. So I think the easiest way to do that is you won't have to do that. You can just change value and utilize it from the step in the past.
Oh, so I could just
Yeah,
you know
you won't need to.
inside.
You won't need to use the mapping step. Just like Gregory demonstrated earlier, you can have an add step and just do a
Mhm.
change value to change a previous thing. But when you look at the execution, you will still see the data and how it should be in each flight. So yeah, it's basically it's hard because in decisions we have a lot of terms that will map to different things, and this is just one of them where you could ignore the mapping step and not use that particular step and just utilize the mapping of the flow steps. Right? It's kind of hard to even talk about because it's a little confusing. But yeah, you could almost always disregard and never use the mapping step.
Really? So I'd never need to use the mapping step. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, just the mapping step. The list mapping step, that one has different use cases where let's say I have data coming from another type and I need to transform my list of strings into a list of validation issues, right? So the list mapping allows you to convert data from one type from a string to another type that you need, right? So that's kind of how that works.
Gotcha. And I do use that a lot when I'm going from different data structures to another.
Perfect. And we'll take it offline too. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've used the mapping step. I feel like it might have been something that had relevance in older versions of decisions. I'm just not sure. We'll definitely find out why. We can talk to some core devs to find out what its function is.
Wait, and also I'll probably like submit a ticket or something. I was curious if this was a normal thing.
Yeah,
I didn't
I don't
bring
know.
much information. Like I can definitely go back and take pictures and stuff like that of the issue.
Of the behavior, yeah.
Yep.
I'm also
Thank
going to
you.
answer Grant's question here, which is based off of your question. You should be able to talk as well now, Grant. And you're saying that you saw the list mapping step and the mapping step earlier. What is the difference between the two, and why would you use them in a flow? So, as Jared was explaining, the mapping step itself is the equivalent of like a change value on an output, where you are just altering the output of something, of a variable that already exists with the output of this step, right? So you have a variable that's somewhere in this flow that has already hit this, and you can now alter what that value would be based upon the output of this, instead of having another variable that would just then get mapped to it. That would be what the mapping step does, and change that value. The
Could you just
list mapping,
could we do it or for the list mapping? Could we demonstrate it with like a list of strings into an account?
absolutely, yeah. List mapping is a little bit different, and I'm grabbing that one right now. Okay, so the list mapping step, on the other hand, will take an output type, so something you want to map it to. I'm going to set the account output type because it has a lot of different fields. And then the inputs are going to be typically a list of strings that you're going to be mapping to those particular values.
You can just
So
set it to
let's say,
I would say set it to a constant on the input and just do like Jared at decision.com or just, 3 made up or real email addresses.
if I can spell, man. There we go. All right, so it takes this list of inputs either dynamically or as a constant, and then you'll go to your item mapping editor here. So you're taking in a list and you're putting out a list, right? You're changing one data type, a list of strings, and mapping it to a list of another data type, in this case, accounts. So once I'm in here, I have to select my input. I know it's going to be tempting to select one of the others, but input is always the correct option because that will be whatever you're mapping into it. Sometimes you have the option to list others, but typically input is what you're going with. And then the item is what you're mapping it to. I want to build data on this because this is a complex data type, and I want to map this to the account email address, which is going to be a little bit lower right here. So now that I have the email address available, I just drag this to this. And now let me show you what this looks like when I debug it. So the input is a list of accounts, right? Or a list of strings. Each one of these is going to output a list of accounts with that particular field mapped into it. So it's a fantastic way of not having to go through like a for loop and trying to map to, one to another and have this go to this one if you're just trying to convert it from one type to another. Or map in necessary information to a type that you already have that you're trying to not go through and do it in a loop. So that's the primary function of this step. Can I provide any more clarity on that? Yep. All right. Cool. Glad to hear it. And then Alex, you had one more question. Can you build a web application with React and have decisions host and act as the back end? With React, I do not know much about the React platform, if I can be honest. I know that decisions, different ways that you can integrate with it, are you can call particular flows as an API.
So are you
can
asking Alexander, like you have an external form that you want to use and you don't want to use decisions UI and you just want to just reference that?
Exactly. The
Oh,
UI, I need something like a little bit more customizable, a little bit more. But I
yeah.
like the back end of it because it's already like tailored, it's already connected to all our databases and things like that. So if I could leverage that to just kind of pass like, inputs through and then just get information back and then display on the React page, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we do have a step. It's called the external form step that allows you to reference if you're in that circumstance where you're like, oh, I have a React, HTML, JSON, JavaScript, person, and you just want to launch that. You can definitely configure that. Greg, if you can find that document, I've done this one time in my 5-year career at Decisions. I think I created an HTML form and I connect to it. So since that was 4 years ago, I don't remember. But this should give you information. Let's see, going down.
This is
Keep going.
IIS. Let's see.
Yeah, this is where I has it. Keep going. Go to the bottom one. This is just the basic process of it. Go to embed decisions form in a web app.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, can decisions like host it as well?
What do you mean by host it? Like the
So
form lives in decisions?
essentially,
No, the decisions will just merely point to it.
gotcha. Okay. So it would still need to be hosted somewhere else, and then it would ping back the decisions for
Yeah,
questions.
exactly.
Right.
It would probably take in like a JSON package or XML,
Yeah.
and basically just goes to you, and then whoever fills out that form, it will send that package to decisions, and then the flow will take it.
Also, I don't think the web app one is what we're looking for. This is just calling the decisions via an external service.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so I think
Jasmine, do we have any other detailed documentations on how to set up a connect to React on a form or for this scenario?
I'm not sure, but I can look into that.
I'm sorry.
Am I not audible?
Oh, we can hear you.
I missed
Okay.
it. I think I
Oh.
missed it.
Oh, I was just saying I'm not sure, but I can look into that for you.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
And then here's the URL, by the way, that you're going to be pointing to externally when you're doing this. So you do have to, where'd it go? Where are you? There you go. That's the input to point to get to that external form that you're trying to create and point users to. But yeah, we can try and get you some documentation on setting this up properly.
Gotcha. Because I know we have a form right now that lives in decisions, and it's hosted, well, not hosted, but basically there's a link in Oro that takes you to decisions, and the user doesn't even know that they're in decisions really, because it just it pops up a new page and then it opens up the form, but it's hosted in decisions at that point, and then they enter it in and then it shoots off. I wanted something similar, but just not using the decisions form, right?
Now this goes a little beyond my expertise of like how React works, but I know what you can do is, let's say if I have an HTML form, I haven't tested this out. This is purely theoretical, just me thinking about it. Is notice that we have the scroll down on the properties of the show external form. Keep going. No, scroll. Yeah. So we have a URL. Now what you can do is if it's a file with HTML that you can load, theoretically, what we can try is if you upload that HTML package of what that form is, and then you put it in decisions as a document, you can have that as a document internal URL. That decision can redirect to itself and then display that and run it that way. That could be something to try. It may work that way. It may not. It may have to be actually right. There's some network limitations where it may have to go externally. It might not be able to ping back to itself, and that's why it might not show it. But it's something we could just merely test out. But that's one thing to try.
Now, when we say form, right? I know we're saying form here, and that usually is because it's taking in information, but this would be like a web page, right? But there would be like an option to like submit something on it, right?
Yeah, correct. So if you
Okay.
could control this, we wouldn't use the HTML display for it. It'd just be a file full of HTML, right?
Mhm.
Like HTML form, button, and all that stuff. And then you just upload that document to the URL in decisions and then just point back to it. Now to configure the UI stuff, you'd still be able to do it. So if you go to configuration, Gregory, right there up at the top, configure integration like in the Flow Designer.
In the Flow Designer, gotcha. Sorry,
You could
the
still,
Zoom thing is in the way. There we go.
oh yeah, no worries. You could still set it up integration type and just say UI.
Right. User
Right,
interface
and
here.
that will still be the same, right? Because basically all you're doing at that point is you have a step that calls another HTML form that lives inside the system, and then you utilize that to call it. That's theoretical, not sure. We'd have to test it out, but that's what I would try. I think it may not work, but it's worth a shot just to test it out.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jared. All right. that's the last question we currently have in the queue right now. But if anyone has any additional ones, please feel free. We are glad to answer them.
I haven't put for the external forms. So I would not use them because when you run it, the way it works, that it stops a workflow, just like an assignment, and it sends out data to your external form. And also with that, you will need to send flow tracking ID and step tracking ID. And on your form, on the external form, when you submit that or close that, you'll need to call back to this workflow using flow tracking ID and step tracking ID, and it will unpause that flow and continue. So with that, you may end up with something really queued up in your memory. Instead of that, I would use just APIs. So you host your form somewhere, then I don't know, you can start from decisions if you need to collect some data and send out to your external form, and then just close there. On an external form, when you submit that, you will call out a different API for decisions. So that's how you would not use that much memory on your decision server.
Gotcha. So you recommend that I host it somewhere else, but I can still use APIs to ping decisions to get my information back and forth, but just don't host it here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that works. Thank you.
Cool beans. Cool. All right. Nothing else in the Q&A yet, so I'm gonna back out of this. Well, while I'm waiting on more questions, I'll go over culture and decisions. Oh yeah, absolutely. Glad to help. And while I go over that, please add any more questions. This is just to make sure that I give people time to write their questions if they have any. So, going into the system here. Decisions has something implemented in it called culture, which affects the date time display, currency displays, and basically configurations for particular user bases that you might expect within the decisions platform, which can include date time translation if you already have that configured. Culture will not configure it for you, it will only determine what it's being translated to. So, an option that you have to set this up is going to the settings, going to the portal settings, and then inside of the portal settings, you have access to culture, right? So default culture. This is portal wide. This is where all users who are not assigned a particular culture are going to see. So if I were to alter this to, for example, I know what this one results in, so I'm just going to save that. You'll see that all the date time formats just flipped around, right? Now we have date, month, year first. This will also affect currency to show pound instead of the dollar sign. So, no date time translation is no date time translation is currently enabled on my server, so you're not going to see that here, but that is an option. So let's say that we go back. I'm going to change this again. There we go. And we'll set that back to English. There we go. Save that. Okay. You can configure this at the account level as well. So you can leave the portal settings to a default and then configure particular accounts to be able to see it in certain ways. I'm running on the admin account, so I'm going to adjust my account just so y'all can see this update in real time. So user culture is at the top. Typically, it is set to nothing by default. But here is where you have the ability to alter it. So if I go here, save that, now you see the same format just occurred again, right? The same change just occurred as before. And that only affects my account, the one that I'm logged into. If I were to change this for another user, they wouldn't see that change. They would only see whatever the portal is set to, or if they had a unique one that they were set up to see as well. So let me save that. But yeah, that's my quick spiel on setting up Decisions culture and some of the functionality that it has. but I don't see any more questions. So, given that we've gone through that little talk and no one else has said anything, I think we're just going to wrap this one up early. Additionally, no one else has joined. So, yeah, thank you all for signing in, tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.